His pace, which had been a slow, deliberate torment, faltered, then ceased altogether. He drew back, just enough, a calculated distance that compelled me to lift my gaze, to meet his. "They're here," he announced, his voice now as calm, as unruffled, as a still summer pond. "Now," he added, a predatory glint in his eyes, "the real fun begins." And just like that, with an infuriating, tantalizing nonchalance, he left me, striding out to greet them. Before we plunge headfirst into this, a quick aside. A significant number of you who find enjoyment in these narratives still haven't yet subscribed. If you happen to be one of them, please, do take a mere second to hit that button. It aids immeasurably with the channel's growth and genuinely means more than you can possibly know. And if you're already a cherished subscriber, my heartfelt thanks. Now, let us begin. Rick's hands were a firm, possessive pressure on my waist as he moved against me, his rhythm slow, deliberate, almost tortuously so, as if he possessed all the time in the world, an eternity to explore and claim. I was perched precariously on the edge of the kitchen counter, my dress bunched unceremoniously around my thighs, pulled close, intimately close, against him. My breath was a ragged, hitched thing in my throat as I struggled, desperately, to remain silent, to suppress the moans that threatened to erupt. The game, a raucous, boisterous affair, was blaring from the living room, my father and his boisterous friends shouting, jeering at the flickering screen, a mere 20 feet, a universe, away. Rick. He was one of my father's closest, most trusted friends. Older, quieter, more reserved than the others, yet there was absolutely nothing hesitant, nothing uncertain about him in this moment. He was steady, intensely focused, every motion imbued with a deliberate, almost clinical intentionality. Every subtle shift radiating an undeniable, unwavering control. He moved like a man who knew, with an almost instinctual certainty, precisely how to take his time, how to savor every moment. And that very quality, was exactly what had drawn me to him, like a moth to an irresistible, dangerous flame. His breath, hot and moist, brushed against the sensitive shell of my ear. "You like this, don't you?" he whispered, his voice rough, low, a gravelly caress. The risk. I couldn't speak. I clung to his broad shoulders, my fingers digging into his flesh, and nodded, a frantic, jerky movement, barely managing to stifle a nascent sound as he leaned in closer, his focus tightening, becoming even more confident, more unshaken. I felt the unforgiving granite of the counter creak, a protesting groan beneath us, his grip steady, unyielding, as he held me firmly in place. I didn't want him to stop. Oh God, I didn't want him to stop. The cacophony of sounds from the living room, the clinking of ice in glasses, the bursts of raucous laughter, the rise and fall of animated, oblivious voices, only served to heighten the illicit thrill, to make it worse, or perhaps, perversely, better. I couldn't tell any more. My father was right there, blissfully unaware. So were his other friends. And I, his daughter, was tangled up, intimately, inextricably, with one of them, as if I never, ever wanted to let go. I covered my mouth with my hand, my breath trembling, my body barely holding itself steady, a fragile vessel on the verge of shattering. His attention, his focus, never wavered. If anything, he seemed even more drawn in, more captivated, by how dangerously, precariously close we were to discovery. Then he froze. I looked up, my breath catching sharply in my throat. Tom stood in the doorway, a silent, imposing figure. Tom, one of my father's oldest, dearest friends, the loudest, most boisterous of the trio, always cracking jokes, always the life of the party. Now completely, utterly silent. Rick jolted back. A sudden, almost violent movement, already straightening his clothes, his composure remarkably intact. "Go," he muttered, his voice a low, urgent command. I slid off the counter, my heart still a frantic wild drum against my ribs, a searing heat pulsing, throbbing beneath my skin, and hurried, almost fled upstairs. I lay on my bed, still flushed, my dress clinging uncomfortably to my legs, a damp second skin. My pulse hadn't slowed, not even a fraction. The potent, illicit energy still hummed, vibrated, thrummed beneath my skin, a restless, insatiable current. The sounds of the game, the oblivious revelry, continued to drift up from downstairs. A while later, quiet, measured footsteps. The sound of the front door opening, then closing with a soft, final click. They were gone. But what Rick had started, what he had awakened within me, I could still feel everywhere. The next day, just as the afternoon sun began its slow descent, I received a message. From Tom. "You looked good last night. Want something even better?" I was already warm, a slow, delicious heat spreading through me, just thinking about the way he'd looked at me in the kitchen. That smirk, that knowing silence, the way he'd walked away without uttering a single, solitary word. He hadn't told my dad. He hadn't said anything at all. But now he was saying exactly, precisely what I wanted, what I needed to hear. "Come by, I'll make it worth your time." He'd always been the bold one, the loudest, most audacious of the three. Always joking, teasing, relentlessly pushing the edge, testing the boundaries. But now, his words felt different, pointed, directed, as if he knew, with an almost preternatural certainty, that I'd say yes. And he was right. I had a weakness, a profound, undeniable weakness for older men, especially men like my dad's friends, men who still carried themselves with an air of quiet, confident authority, men who didn't have to chase anything or anyone, men who simply, effortlessly, let you come to them. Rick had lit a fire in me, a smouldering, dangerous ember. But this was about to fan it into a raging, uncontrollable inferno. I didn't bother with excuses, with elaborate fabrications. I simply told my dad I had some errands to run, then got dressed without overthinking it, without succumbing to a paralysis of indecision. Something simple, something casual, something that wouldn't betray the turmoil, the anticipation raging within me. The drive over was short, almost a blur. I barely remember the roads, the familiar landmarks, just the low, insistent hum in my chest, the undeniable, irresistible pull that hadn't let up, not even for a moment, since last night. And the way my legs felt unsteady, almost weak, the second I saw his name, Tom's name, illuminate my screen. When I pulled into his driveway, the front door was already cracked open, a silent, beckoning invitation. He was waiting. I stepped inside. The coolness of the air-conditioned house a stark contrast to the heat raging within me, and shut the door firmly behind me. Tom was on the couch, one arm resting casually across the back, watching me with an unnervingly calm, knowing intensity, as if he'd been expecting this, anticipating this, all along. He didn't smile. He didn't speak. He just stood, a slow, deliberate movement, walked over to me and wrapped his hands around my waist, his touch firm, possessive, as if we'd done this 1,000 times before. His lips found mine before I could even draw a proper breath. There was no hesitation, no tentative exploration, just heat. Immediate, focused, all-consuming. I leaned into him, my fingers gripping his shirt, clinging to him as his hands pulled me closer, tighter, until my back met the unyielding coolness of the door. Clothes came off fast, a blur of discarded fabric. His fingers, surprisingly nimble, found every clasp, every fastening, as if he'd memorized their locations long ago. My dress slipped to the floor without a sound, a silent, silken puddle at my feet. His shirt vanished just as quickly as I reached for it, eager, impatient. Nothing felt rushed, nothing forced, just inevitable. I moved in again, seeking his lips, his heat, but he stopped me gently with a hand on my shoulder. "Slow," he said, his voice low, steady, a velvet command. Then he guided me down. I lowered myself to the plush rug at his feet, his hand remaining, light but assured, on my shoulder. I didn't need instruction. I already understood, with a primal, instinctual clarity, what he wanted. And I wanted it just as much, perhaps even more. I leaned forward, letting instinct, raw and unfiltered, take over. His breath hitched, a quiet, almost imperceptible sound, his fingers threading into my hair in a way that felt steady, grounding, not controlling. I set the pace, deliberately slow and careful at first, watching his reactions, listening intently to the subtle yet significant way his breathing changed, deepened. He didn't say a word, but I could feel the tension building within him, coiling tighter with every subtle shift of his body, every shallow, ragged inhale. I adjusted, adding pressure, changing pace, watching him respond, reveling in his response. His jaw tensed, his eyes, dark and intense, remained locked on mine, his entire body leaning into the moment, surrendering to it. When he finally, eventually, pulled me back up, his chest was rising and falling unevenly, his breath coming in short, sharp gasps. Without a word, he scooped me into his arms. I laughed softly, a breathless, surprised sound, caught completely off guard. My breath was short, my heart hammering against my ribs as he carried me, as if I weighed nothing, as if I were a precious, fragile thing. The hallway blurred around us, a dizzying kaleidoscope of light and shadow, but the tension, the anticipation, only sharpened, intensified. The bedroom door was already open, another silent invitation. He didn't stop. The moment I landed, with a soft thud, on the mattress, he was with me. Not frantic, not desperate, just sure. His hands traced the sensitive skin of my thighs as he knelt beside the bed, spreading them with a calm, deliberate, almost reverent care, before leaning in. I arched instinctively, my body anticipating, craving his touch. He started with a whisper of contact, a feather-light touch, barely there, coaxing a reaction, a tremor, from the smallest, most infinitesimal movements. Then he adjusted, just enough, always just enough, to keep me off balance, to keep me guessing. He changed pace before I could settle, before I could find my own rhythm, shifting pressure, exploring every sensitive spot with a precise, almost clinical attention. I couldn't hold still. My fingers twisted, writhed in the soft fabric of the sheets. He never gave me what I expected, what my body craved in that moment. Always one step ahead, always drawing me further, deeper, in. By the time he finally moved up, I was shaking, a leaf caught in a hurricane. He hovered over me, one hand at my waist. A firm, possessive anchor, The other braced beside my head, caging me. When our bodies finally met, it wasn't rushed, wasn't frantic. He moved against me with a quiet, confident certainty. Every shift deliberate, smooth, exquisitely controlled. I held on to his arms, clinging to him as he found a rhythm, a devastating, intoxicating rhythm that kept tightening the tension, coiling it ever more intensely, without ever, not once, breaking it. Then he adjusted the angle, changed the pattern, and my back arched, my breath stuck, trapped, in my throat. Everything, every nerve ending, every sensation winding tighter, tighter, tighter. He wasn't just confident, he was precise. He read my reactions, my every subtle shift, my every ragged gasp, and adapted instantly, not by luck, not by chance, but on purpose. It worked. I whispered his name, the sound torn from me, before I even realized I had. He smiled against my neck, a slow, predatory, satisfied smile, as if that was exactly, precisely, what he'd been waiting for, patiently biding his time. His pace changed again, slower now, heavier, pulling me further, deeper, in with each deliberate, possessive pass. I reached for the headboard, my fingers scrabbling for purchase, trying desperately to hold myself steady. But the tension, the exquisite, unbearable tension, kept rising, kept building. I almost missed it, the sound so faint, so unobtrusive, just a faint knock, more like a gentle tap against the door. Tom stilled. He kissed my collarbone, once, a lingering, possessive brand, then stood up without a word. I watched him walk away, my heart thudding, a frantic drum against my ribs. They were here. Once they were inside the room, they stood near the bed, calm, composed, their presence filling the space. There was no awkwardness, no discernible pause, just presence. I sat up slowly, my breath still uneven, ragged, and met their collective gaze. No one spoke. The silence was thick, charged, electric. I slid to the edge of the mattress and lowered myself gracefully onto my knees before them. Tom stepped forward. I reached for him without a flicker of hesitation, my fingers running languidly down the taut muscles of his thighs as I leaned in. His breath slipped out, sharp, quiet, a hiss of anticipation. One hand brushed my cheek, a fleeting, almost tender caress. Rick moved in beside him, a silent, imposing figure. I welcomed him with the same effortless ease, one hand moving to him while the other kept its intoxicating rhythm with Tom. I alternated gently, seamlessly, shifting my focus, my attention, between them, reacting to their subtle movements, to the almost imperceptible changes in their breathing. Gary stepped in last, completing the tableau. I looked up at him, a slow, deliberate appraisal, then leaned in, planting a soft, lingering kiss just above his hip. His hand landed on my shoulder, light but firm, a silent acknowledgement. I kept the motion going, circling, weaving, between them, maintaining the intoxicating rhythm as their carefully constructed restraint began, inevitably, to wear thin, to fray at the edges. When they finally lifted me, my entire body buzzed, thrummed, vibrated with an almost unbearable energy. Tom and Rick moved in perfect, practiced sync, one beneath my arms, the other under my knees. They lowered me onto the bed as if I were nothing but breath and weightless, incandescent heat. Gary stepped between my legs the second I settled, his presence a potent, undeniable reality. "Finally," he said, his voice low, a gravelly rumble. "My turn." I didn't speak. I just waited, a willing, eager offering. He leaned in with a surprising, almost reverent care, adjusting my position with one hand at my hip and the other behind my knee. I gripped the sheets, my knuckles white, as he began to move, measured, grounded, pulling me into his rhythm without force, without aggression. Tom leaned down, his mouth at my collarbone, his breath a hot, moist caress skimming across my sensitive skin. Rick knelt beside me, brushing a stray tendril of hair from my face as he brought himself close again, his presence a comforting, familiar heat. I opened to him without hesitation, without reservation. Gary never faltered, his movements remaining calm, steady, relentlessly focused. Tom's lips traveled lower, teasing, tormenting, leaving a trail of searing warmth across my quivering body. Rick brought my hand back to him, guiding me in without words, his touch sure, knowing. I was surrounded, enveloped, consumed, hands, mouths, breath, motion. I couldn't keep track. I didn't want to keep track. When Gary finally pulled back, the shift was seamless, almost imperceptible. Tom and Rick moved again, lifting me mid-air, one holding my back, the other my legs. And they eased me onto Tom with a practiced, almost professional care. I wrapped myself around him instinctively, my body molding to his. He was already ready, already waiting. Then, Rick stepped in behind, his hands landing firmly at my hips, holding me in place, a silent, possessive claim. What followed was slower, heavier, more intense. I gasped. A rush of air, no sound, my head dropping back against Rick's broad shoulder, as the motion between them, between all of us, locked into one steady, devastating, all-consuming rhythm. I was held, moved, surrounded, my breath fractured, my pulse racing, everything, every sensation, every emotion, tangled inextricably with theirs. When they finally, eventually, lowered me again, I was trembling, a leaf in a storm, but Gary was already waiting, lying back, ready, eager. I climbed over him, my palms braced on his firm chest, my legs shaky, almost useless, beneath me. He caught my hips, his grip strong, steadying, and studied me for a long, intense moment as I began to move with him. A gradual, rolling, intoxicating rhythm that built, inexorably with every subtle, deliberate shift. Tom returned, positioning himself behind me, his hands circling my waist, anchoring me as he pressed in closer, his body a hot, insistent presence against my back. Each movement from him, each subtle thrust, tightened the already exquisite pressure between me and Gary. Then, Rick stepped forward, his eyes burning into mine. He reached for me. I welcomed him again, without hesitation, without reservation, bringing him into the intoxicating, all-consuming rhythm with us. All three together. Thought vanished. Time stretched, distorted, ceased to exist. I let go of everything, every inhibition, every fear, every last vestige of control. Every breath, every sound, every inch of me was wrapped, enveloped, consumed by them. I didn't care where one ended and the next began. Gary was first. His breath caught, a sharp, ragged sound, his hands gripping tighter, his body going still, rigid, as the waves crashed over him. Tom followed soon after, his rhythm faltering, a low, guttural sound rumbling against my shoulder before he too slowed, succumbed. Rick pulled back last, his breath stuttering, his gaze locked with an almost painful intensity on mine as the air around us, so recently thick with sound and motion, went quiet, still. Stillness fell. A heavy, profound blanket. I collapsed onto Gary, my body weak, boneless, my lungs soaring, desperate for air. My limbs were useless, heavy, unresponsive. My skin was flushed, buzzing, thrumming with the lingering echoes of sensation. No one spoke. They stood around me, present, grounded, watchful. Their presence a silent, potent testament to what had just transpired. I stayed where I was, my eyes half closed, unsure, uncaring how much time had passed. Then I felt it. A familiar touch at my waist. A subtle shift behind me. A presence I already knew. Leaning in, slow, patient, certain. My eyes fluttered open. It wasn't over. I didn't hold back. I gave them everything I had, and they, in turn, didn't let a single precious drop of it go to waste.
Thank you for listening. Please share your thoughts, like this video if you found it helpful, and subscribe for more.